if I even just look at you, I mean, we're going to look at your hormones, but I would predict that you're more androgenized, meaning that there's more testosterone, right? Which also speaks to lifting heavy things, pushing heavy things, and you'll most likely feel better. So that speaks to longevity. Testosterone is what gives you that.
Well, let's talk about that because my profile said I'm balanced, like between the two.
Okay, let's take a look.
And I didn't really understand what that meant. I'm very familiar with, people being either estrogen dominant or androgen dominant, but I didn't really understand the whole balanced.
The way we look at hormones is in a cascade. And it's very important to look at them that way. And this is why, by the way, most genetic tests don't even include hormones, because for the most part, hormones aren't actionable, meaning that if I just tell you how you deal with progesterone, I haven't really told you much. So let me just share this.
Well, I find this to be very important because I talk to a lot of women about, their hormones and trying to explain. So I think this is really important.
This is huge and I would say the place where we probably have the biggest impact is in female hormone health. It's that delta value of it just sucks so bad. The doctor told me it's my hormones. I'm supposed to have problems. To like, there's no need for problems. And
yeah. Don't even get me started. But yeah, so please proceed.
So here's what's happening: is whether you're a man or a woman, you do the same thing. You take cholesterol, you create progesterone. Progesterone converts into testosterone.
Right.
And then testosterone either converts into estrogen, gets cleared as an androgen from this pool, or converts into a DHT.
Right.
So the reason you were told you have sort of a mid-level, first of all, your initial hormone production is not that, the volume is low. So this initial pool of testosterone is low, right?
Okay.
But you're not converting it all into estrogen because you're clearing some of it first. So this is why they called you co-dominant, because if this was a red light here and the rest of the map was the same, red light here, no DHT. DHT, by the way, is the manly man testosterone, where you have the ripped, jacked muscles with all the striations and you look like Superman. Right. That's what DHT it is, but it also kills your hair follicles and gives you prostate problems, right? It's toxic. Right. So for you, what the report is trying to tell you is you make some hormones, not a lot, but you make some. Then before converting them all into estrogen, you get rid of some. So you utilize the testosterone that speaks to your jawline, your sort of more petite frame. It's probably harder for you to put on weight and fat than a typical person. You're closer to like a Kendall Jenner than a Kim Kardashian, right? So Kim would be like mega estrogen, no testosterone, right? Which would give her that shape and figure. And
right.
So, and this is what we call co-dominance. You're right in the middle, which is a good place to be because you have the testosterone being utilized for sort of longevity, vitality, strength. You have the estrogen for mass, all the feminine hair, skin, quality lining for fertility, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. You're not producing DHT. If you had DHT, you would look more like this plus the DHT. Mm-hmm. You would look like an Olympian. Like we would see every ripple of every muscle, and your six pack.
Yeah, you definitely can't see my muscles, but I put on muscle very easily.
Yeah, you should be able to put on muscle easily and get strong.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, but you can't see it.
You can't see the ripples because the DHT is not there. So now we move forward and look at your estrogen toxicity. This is another big, huge red flag. What we see is in that monthly cycle, you convert the testosterone into estrogen to some degree.
Right.
Before clearing it, you first convert it into 2, 4, or 16 hydroxyestrogen. You have a red light here, which means you don't create the nice one, the good stuff. You create both of the somewhat toxic and the highly toxic estrogen metabolite, which means that, it's not the best, but again, knowing this early, you can do something about it. If you do know this, and just like the typical American woman, 85% of women spend a long time on the birth control pill. That's more estrogen, leading to more estrogen toxicity. More and more women are starting to take hormone replacement therapy as they age for youthfulness and osteoporosis and various different issues. That's more estrogen, leading to more estrogen toxicity. Why is it that, and we talked about this also when we met in Orlando, was, why is it that so many women at the menopause age get breast cancer? Why does it happen at that time? Right? Why
Right.
not 16 when they hit puberty, or why not 80? Yes, it does happen at that time, but the huge majority happens during menopause. Because menopause is when you stop having a menstrual cycle and getting rid of this stuff, right?
Okay.
No,
Right.
right now you're clearing it. You're getting rid of it every month. There's still some harm being done,
Right.
especially again if you take a birth control pill or eat estrogen dominant foods or have estrogen mimics in your environment. There's things like chemicals and such that mimic estrogen when they enter your body. Now, once you get to menopause and you're no longer clear, your body says, "Oh, there's this toxic metabolite. I need to keep you safe, so I'm going to go store it in fat."
Right.
Because fat doesn't hurt you, right?
Right.
Where do women have fat? In their breasts, right?
Yeah.
And what happens when you send all this toxicity, and maybe at that age you also start taking hormone therapy because your doctor says you're menopausal and it's a good idea, it's going to keep you young, good for whatever, right?
Right.
That's where all that cellular structure that's in the all the sensitive glands were never meant to deal with this. And why so many women at that age all of a sudden have that inflammatory insult that leads to the cellular damage that leads to cancer formation.
Right. So I find this highly interesting because I've researched a lot on hormones, and I'm hugely about how should I say this? Educating on the Women's Health Initiative studies that came out in the early 90s, where we started finding out what all of this excess estrogen and does in women with or without a uterus, and at what point in their lives, and we started learning about the increased risk of breast cancer, of thrombosis and all this kind of stuff. And so I love that you're now educating women on why this is happening,
why it happens, exactly.
and why it happens to some women and not others. And to me, now that we have this kind of information available, especially as we enter menopause, I'm my birthday is next week. I turned 47. This is hugely important for me to understand at this point in my life.
Yeah.
But I wish that women would understand this earlier, in their 20s, when they're thinking about taking birth control.
Yeah, and taking it for 5-10 years,
Yes.
which is often the case. So now the woman that's taking birth control pill, it says right on the side of the box that there's somewhat one of the potential risks is increased stroke, increased risk. But why again is it some women get a stroke and some don't?
Right.
There's from prolonged use, potential risk of stroke, because some women are estrogen toxic, some are not. Some have poor quality endothelial linings, some have poor lipid transport and vasculature of the brain. That's one piece of the puzzle. We're saying that you're already like a sitting duck. You've got the wrong suboptimal profile, but it takes that trigger to push you over the edge, and the trigger happens to be the birth control pill in that case for these various different types of women. Now, when we look at the last step, is there's hormone dominance, what do you produce? Then there's hormone toxicity, what quality is it? Then there's clearance, how do you get rid of it? So there's good and bad news, where the good news is you have your sawtooth and your COMT is fast, the same COMT that clears the dopamine from the brain. Right? The bad news is, again, you're missing those detox genes, right? So you're somewhat in the middle for clearance of this stuff. So what this speaks to is less input. You need less estrogens entering your system, and you also need support in clearance to make sure that the body isn't overwhelmed with toxicity where now it needs to go store it in fat. It can just never, it's cleared through your work of taking the right supplementation.
Right. And so what is that supplementation for people like me? So
here's the funny thing is, I can't tell you how many women we've dealt with that, have heavy metals or some kind of toxic marker in their blood that go to their naturopath. And you would think, okay, what is detox? It's glutathionization. That's the process.
Right.
So if this person is toxic, why don't I give them glutathione? It makes sense if that's what causes, if that's what detoxes you. But what happens in some of these women, many, they take the glutathione IV at a naturopath office, and then they're knocked out. They're in bed for a month. And then the response to that is, well, yeah, because you have all these toxins that are just now kicking all over the place and making no. What's actually happening is you don't have the genetic instruction telling glutathione what to do. You don't have the gene, like you, right? So now glutathione is in your body, yes, binding onto toxins, but also binding onto minerals and nutrients and everything in the bloodstream, and literally putting you in bed.
Wow.
And so what's needed is the precursors, ingredients that go to work on their own. NAC, selenium, alpha lipoic acid, glycine is a big one. So these are the things where precision supplementation, supplements are considered safe, which they are. There's no sort of dire consequence. But for some profiles, yeah, it's going to give you an adverse reaction. Like some women will end up in bed because of taking glutathione, which seems harmless.
Wow. So a couple questions here. First of all, this is why offline I told you that if I had not become a biohacker, I'd probably be dead by now. I've been taking NAC supplements for 2 years, and I actually recently just started glycine. But I take a whole crap load of supplements, every day, depending. But I was taking glutathione. So are you telling me that I should stop that? Is that not helpful at all?
For you, no. It's literally you'll feel better off of it. If you're taking the glycine and you remove the glutathione, you'll actually feel better.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is like mind blowing to me, right?
And it's mind blowing to us that this information exists, and everyone we talk to is mind blown because it's not provided. So that's our mission, is to get it out there. As you know, we're a research company that has just recently sort of launched commercially.
Yes.
We spent a lot of money doing a lot of research for a number of years, and now we're saying we're ready to get out there. But that reaction is appropriate because nobody knows this stuff. Nobody hears it.
Well, like you said, we hear, glutathione. We need to ramp up that pathway, provide, and so, we talked about NAC, but, what about other things that are part of that pathway, that glutathionization pathway? What are other things that people can take to ramp that up? Vitamin C or, NAD supplements, niacin.
Yeah, so NAD supports cellular health, right? The other thing that should be considered in combination with dealing with detox and glutathionization is mitochondrial support, which, by the way, you do a really good job. So your cells take in oxygen and nutrition to create energy, and in that process, they create oxidants, which are toxic.
Right.
And you do a really good job of getting rid of those oxidants. You have the optimal genes there. So that's the one sort of saving grace in your detox profile. But anything you can do to support the mitochondria allows a cell to be under less stress to support everything else. So this is why some people who, they get COVID and they get super sick and they can't understand why. It's because metabolically they're not healthy. They may not have a labeled disease yet that they're being treated for, but they're just in a metabolically unhealthy state. The cells are under a lot of stress. And that's that period of, I'm not 50 yet, so I don't have diabetes. Right. But I'm also, 35 plus, where my cells are under enough load where they're stressed. I just need something to push me over the edge, and that thing happened to be COVID, right? So that's where I would say you don't need much more in terms of detox, but you do need to consider the other systems: mitochondrial support, methylation and anti-inflammatory. If you can support your methylation pathways, which then support the ability to deal with the inflammation being caused by the toxicity, you're kind of hitting it from all angles. And methylation is like your B complexes, but even there you have to be specific. Do you take a sublingual under the tongue? A simple thing like, did your ancestors eat beef or did they eat goat and lamb? Well, guess what? If they ate goat and lamb, which is true for a lot of ethnicities, then the B12 pill that you swallow, you genetically can't even metabolize, because there's a gene that tells your gut what to do, and what to do. There's some people that need it under the tongue or an IV, and that plus the B complex, B9, etc. So I would say it's like attacking it from multiple angles: the detox, the mitochondrial health, and the methylation or anti-inflammatory response. And that's your cellular health package. Now all of a sudden your cells are healthy, and you're resilient. It's so much easier to cope with all of this stuff.
Absolutely. You know what? I want to go back to something that you said about, the fact that, you need to support all the systems. And, what irritates me sometimes is when I hear people who have been told that, this thing that they did over here doesn't really affect their body over here, And to me, that couldn't be more wrong. I mean, everything is connected. Everything in your body is connected. Like you said, because somebody was already at a high toxin load metabolically, it was, not necessarily, it could have, if it wasn't COVID, it would have been something else to push them over the edge, and so I think that that's what people don't realize is, everything that you do affects your whole entire body. It's all connected,
Yeah, and it's all, so you got to think of disease and the symptoms that we complain about. The reason you go to the doctor, something hurts, and then you're trying to figure out what's the cause. That thing is like a spoke out of the central hub of the system failure. You're already doing something wrong. It probably started 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, right? So this central hub is that cellular health issue, and it can be different reasons for different people: detox, methylation, mitochondrial health, hormonal health, cellular structure, like bad quality endothelial. There's different reasons why, right? So now that thing eventually starts to have these spokes of like headache, eczema, gut issues, diarrhea, right? Possibly a cancer, or that it could always be drilled back down to something central and foundational, which is true like system health. And if you deal with that thing, all of these spokes go away. Right?
Yeah.
That's health. That's not symptom masking. That's not reactionary. That's being healthy. Like, you were born healthy. Why not maintain that? And one day you're in the Bahamas and the coconut drops on your head and you die. That's how it should be, right? You should die healthy.